So this morning we're carrying on with our series on David. Those of you who've been with us, we started with David being denied, we looked at David being anointed, and then last week we looked at David being victorious. And I need to just have a very real human moment here. It was only about 2 weeks into the David series that I realized the themes were spelling out the word David. Hey, it wasn't just me. Denied, anointed, victorious. You with me? D-A-V. And today we're looking at insidious. Does anybody know what the word insidious means? Kind of. Well, no, it's got like a negative connotation. It's okay. We're going to get there this morning. And so besides the story of David and Goliath, which is very well known, this is maybe one of the stories of David that people know, that people recognize. And I'm just going to move this because I'm not in the middle and that's going to bug me. I'm not super OCD, but that's going to be annoying. Bear with me. I'm going to read from 2 Samuel chapter 11 this morning, and I'm going to read most of the chapter. The reason I'm going to do that is because the story that it tells, the story that it spells out is juicy. There's no other word for it, and that's where we're going to start this morning. 2 Samuel chapter 11 from verse 1 to 27 says, "In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up and walked around the roof of his palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, 'She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite.' You'd think David would stop, she's the wife of someone, but no. David then sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. But the woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, 'I am pregnant.' So David sent this word to Joab and the army, 'Send me Uriah the Hittite.' And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, 'Go down to your house, wash your feet.' So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants, and did not go down to his house. David was told Uriah didn't go home last night, and so he asked Uriah, 'Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home?' Uriah said to David, 'The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing.' Then David said to him, 'Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back.' So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. So in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, his army's commander, and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, 'Put Uriah out in front, where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die.' So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died." Then further down, verse 26 says, "When Uriah's wife Bathsheba heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, however, David had her brought into his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done had displeased the Lord." So I need to know from you this morning, how many of you watch Days of Our Lives? Hey. How many? Where's the age group? How many of you watched Dynasty? Ah, there we go. There's a few more. So, am I right in saying that Days of Our Lives and all the soap operas are some of the most ridiculous shows you will ever watch? Thank you. It's not just me. So I remember in grade 7 distinctly rushing home, and I think it was on SABC1 at 5 o'clock every evening, and like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. But I stopped watching because of how utterly ridiculous it got. So I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a whole saga where there was a Salem serial killer called Marlena, and she was killing out everyone in the town. But then once she'd killed everyone in the town, it turned out, no, they were actually living on an island somewhere, and they were all alive and everything was okay. The older generation who've watched Dynasty, he woke up and it was all a dream. Nobody was killed, nothing happened. Let me tell you though, Days of Our Lives has nothing on this story. Nothing. Here we have David. David, a man described as God's own heart, who's walking around his palace, he's not with his troops, happens to see a woman bathing, and instead of going, "Good job, Lord," and turning and walking away, he sends messages. Go find out who she is. Oh, well, she's married. Oh, that's okay. I'm the king. Bring her to me. I'm just going to sleep with her. That's what we do. Please don't do that. That's what we do. I sleep with her. She's pregnant. Oh, gosh, what am I going to do? Because her husband is away in a battle, and he's going to come back and his wife's pregnant? No, I'll just call the husband back from battle, let him sleep with his wife, then he'll think it's his kid, end of story. No, he hasn't slept with his kid. What am I going to do? I'll just get him killed. Done and dusted. This is David. David, in 1 Samuel 13, verse 14, Samuel is speaking to Saul before David's time and says, "Saul, your kingdom will not endure, because the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart." In Acts 13, verse 22, Paul reiterates, he says, after removing Saul, God made David their king. God testified concerning him, "I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do." The story of David and Goliath, we've just done. We know David stands in front of Goliath, and he doesn't say, "I'm amazing, I'm going to take you down." He says, "No, you come at me with sword and shield, but I come at you in the name of the Lord, because it's his name that you are putting down. And so I will fight on God's behalf." In 1 Kings 15, verse 5, though, it sums it up pretty well, where it says, "For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite." And so a definition of insidious, that is our theme for today. Insidious means to proceed in a gradual, subtle way, but with very harmful effects. Insidious, gradual, it's subtle, it's undercover. You don't always see it coming, but the effects and the consequences of it are vast. And so David's actions were insidious. They were subtle, gradual, undercover. He saw a woman bathing. Okay, he could have stopped, but he didn't. He sent a messenger going, "Well, let me find out about her. Let me see who she is." He could have stopped there, but he didn't. He sent messengers to go get her. He could have stopped there, but he didn't. He slept with her. She fell pregnant. He called Uriah. We know the story now. He could have stopped there, but he didn't, until it ended up with a man being killed and with David taking Bathsheba as his wife into his home. And so this morning, firstly, I want to start with, how did it go so wrong so quickly? How did it go so wrong? We've been looking at David. We've been looking at everything that he is, a man after God's own heart. Somebody will stand up for Jesus. Well, for God, yes, in that time. Somebody will stand up and fight, who's willing to do that. And yet, all of a sudden, it slips down. And the Bible is not super, doesn't give a huge explanation of what happened. But there's a couple of things that come up which we can surmise might have been the case. Number one, David was not with his troops. We read straight away in verse 1, "In the spring, at the time when kings go to war, David sent Joab." David was king, but he didn't go out with his troops to war. So maybe there was a reason, a wrong reason, that he was staying at the palace. But number two, David had a wandering eye. And I want to suggest this morning that him actually seeing Bathsheba was not the sin. That was the temptation. It was when David acted on it that it became a sin, when he put action to that temptation. Remember that Jesus, when he was baptized, was led into the desert to be tempted for 40 days. That is not the sin. He just didn't act on it. I want to suggest that Uriah was probably very tempted. I mean, can you imagine? He's been out fighting battles, probably hasn't had a proper shower for days, hasn't eaten great food, and all of a sudden he gets the chance to come home. But he says, no, it is not right. I will not go and stay at my home. I will not spend time with my wife. I will not go and eat that food and that drink because my army, the people that I serve with, are out in the country, are out suffering, are sleeping in tents. Being tempted is not a sin, but acting on it like David did is. Giving way to one sin can also just lead and spiral into another. And so if you're brave, you can put your hand up, but you don't have to. Have you ever been caught out in a lie? Nobody. Gracious me, guys. One person, thank you. Somebody's please don't tell me I'm the only one. I'll just preach to myself. You can all go home and have a wonderful Mother's Day. Have you ever been caught out in a lie and all of a sudden you panic because they know that you're going to lie unless you tell another lie that covers it so it seems like you're telling the truth? Not just me. Okay, and then somebody overhears you. So all of a sudden you're like, damn it, they knew that I wasn't there, so I've just got to tell another lie so that they understand. And so it seems like, and it just leads to one sin and another sin and another sin and another sin. Once we've opened the door for one sin to take place, we can spiral into more sin and more sin and more sin. One of the reasons I believe is that sin separates us from God. And so the moment we allow one sin to take hold, Jesus is here and we've kind of taken a step that way. So it's a little bit harder to hear his voice. It's a little bit more difficult to do what he wants, and we sin again, and we just take another step out of the light. That's quite ironic, into the darkness. Another reason people suggest why perhaps David fell into sin so badly was he might have become comfortable. He might have become complacent. He's become king. He's killed Goliath. He is victorious. He's doing wonderfully. And so maybe in that moment, he became a little bit complacent. He became a little bit comfortable with who he was and what he was doing. And that's where temptation just struck him and where he decided to sin. And so are you all with me so far on the doom and gloom train? Great, because we're going to carry on. This morning, there's something, we can't help but read the story and let it lead us to a place of introspection, a place where we look at our own lives. And I want to say that this morning is not about beating ourselves up, because too many of us do that as Christians. We believe that because we've sinned, because we're not perfect, we've messed up, and so we're just going to chastise ourselves and we're just going to beat ourselves up because how dare we get it wrong? But that's not what this is about. We as Christians need to be able to look at our own lives and recognize where we have fallen short. We recognize it, we call it out, and we face it and we overcome it. And so what sin of yours, not your wives, not your husbands, not the person sitting next to you, what sin of yours have you been overlooking? As you sit here, what sin of yours do you think is inconsequential? Because maybe it doesn't hurt anybody else. Maybe nobody else even knows about it. Maybe it's not even hurting you, technically. Maybe it's making your life easier. What sin of yours are you overlooking? And are you letting that sin just lead you into more sin and to spiral and to spiral? There's a band called Casting Crowns who brought out a song called Slow Fade a couple of years ago. And I love the words. I'm going to read them to you. It says, "Be careful, little eyes, what you see. It's the second glance that ties your hands as darkness pulls the strings. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white have turned to gray. It's a slow fade. It doesn't happen like this. It's a gradual step into sin. Thoughts invade, choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. It's a slow fade." And then they sing in the bridge, "The journey from your mind to your hands is shorter than you're thinking." Are you in a place where you think as a Christian you're invincible? That you can't get anything wrong? And maybe becoming a bit complacent in that the journey from your mind, the temptation, to your hands, the action, is shorter than you're thinking. Be careful if you think you stand, you just might be sinking. And now that you're all rightfully so miserable, there is always good news. There is always good news, because the sin that we face and the sin that we get stuck in is not the end of the story. Jesus offers mercy. Jesus offers forgiveness and grace and love and peace in abundance, more than we will ever know. That is why we did Victorious last week. It made sense with DAVID, but it makes sense to look at Victorious before you look at Insidious and the nature of sin, because we as Christians live victoriously. We should. We as Christians have the power of Christ behind us. We sang this morning, my weapon is a melody, I'm surrounded. This is how I fight my battles. And yet sometimes we don't fight at all, because we are walking around depressed and caught by our sin and thinking that there is no way out. This morning I'm telling you there is a way out. There is mercy enough to cover whatever you think you have done that is so bad that you cannot get back. There is grace and forgiveness enough to cover whatever you think is so bad that there is no hope, or that life will never be the same again. There is always mercy, always grace, always a way back, and that will pick up more next week. And as I said to the group this morning, I cannot for the life of me remember what the last D stands for, so you'll just have to come to church and find out yourself. But as a time of reflection to close off this morning, I want to share from one of the commentaries on Scripture. It's the Matthew Henry commentary about this passage, and he's speaking about those caught in sin. It says, "Let us follow David in his humiliation, repentance, and other eminent graces, before we think ourselves only a backslider and not a hypocrite." So easy to call other people hypocrites, but when we mess up, no, we've just slidden back a little bit. Let us all watch against the beginnings of self-indulgence and keep at the utmost distance from all evil. But with the Lord there is mercy and plenteous redemption. Hear that, there is mercy and plenteous. Not just a little bit of redemption, but redemption in full and overwhelmingly abundant. God will cast out no humble, penitent believer, nor will he suffer Satan to pluck his sheep out of his hand. God will not allow that to happen.